Oh, it's amazing.
Absolutely. Had to put that the most confusing way possible.
First middle.
I take it from the little symbol we're live now.
I'm going to assume that.
Oh, yeah, looks like it.
Hello.
Okay, hello world.
Hello.
World. Strange new world. I think we're live.
As tech
Hello?
issues continue to abound.
Oh,
Yeah,
there it is.
Yep, we're there.
Yes, we are live on YouTube.
Yay!
We're live on YouTube. Is anyone?
Huzzah!
Somebody says they can't see us yet.
Oh, that means that's a yes, though.
I'm not seeing any comments.
They're private comments.
Oh, okay. Okay.
The
Can they see us now?
ones almost within audible range. Can they see us now? I am asking loudly.
No,
No.
yeah, we're visible. Oh, we're visible over here on mine.
Oh, wait.
Apparently, we are visible elsewhere.
Okay, we're visible and audible. Yay, all the good things.
Visible and audible. That's great. Now, if only they could smell us.
Maybe.
I
God.
don't think
no.
anyone wants that, to be honest. I mean, you're lucky I took off my pajamas. I only half took off my pajamas. They're still on underneath my top.
I'm wearing a fancy dress and slippers.
It's the
I feel like
Yeah.
it's the lost days attire.
from like the nighttime pajamas into the daytime pajamas.
Great. So who are we and what are we doing here?
We are unlicensed oral arts, and we are here to tell stories.
I was about to chime in with, we are here to party, but we're not.
No, we're not. Very much not.
We very specifically moved this from the New Year's Eve to avoid partying because we are very anti-party this evening.
Mm-hmm.
We are here to lament the passing of an awful, awful, awful year.
And hope
And
that
to
it
take
does.
everyone. Yes.
I quite enjoyed this year, actually.
Mhm.
Just being allowed to say go away to people has been great. Yeah. Not having to make up an excuse because there were already excuses abounding. It was great.
Yeah, see, I like that up to the point that there is a global pandemic. What didn't qualify as an excuse not to meet up with friends.
Yeah. Yeah, Zoom kind
Wow.
of
Yeah. But on to lighter matters. We are here to tell some stories this evening, and we have long planned that I will kick off this evening. So for whatever reason, I have been thinking an awful lot about politics recently. Without trying to get too controversial or too into it, I just feel that over the year we've seen a display of ineptitude and downright dangerous behavior, and obviously lack of leadership in both the UK and the US. Mostly due to the fact that Trump is a narcissistic, delusional, hate-filled man-child, and Boris Johnson is a fearmongerer with a hard-on for Euroscepticism, empire, and British fisheries. But whenever I think about awful political leaders, my mind always goes back to Bress. You see, Bress was practically born for a career in politics. His father was Indech, who was the king of the Fovera, a collection of sea raiders who operated mostly on the islands surrounding Ireland, and of Eru, one of the Tuatha De Danann and one of the three literal personifications of Ireland itself. Suffice to say, they had a lot of political clout between them, and their union was seen as advantageous. When Bress was born, it was seen as a time of change. Up to that point, Tuatha De Danann and the Fovera had been fighting on and off for years. You see, the Fovera controlled the sea surrounding Ireland. So the Tuatha Dé Danann weren't able to make any trade agreements with any foreign third parties without the consent of the Fabhara. You could almost say that the Fabhara controlled all trade to and from Ireland, and that to enable to comply with trading rights within the world, that the Irish people had to, I don't know, obey certain standards and regulations in both trade and work practices. And for some reason, this annoyed the Tuatha Dé Danann awfully. And besides the fact they were fishing in their fucking waters. But anyway, when Breis was born, he was given all the political education a young man deserved. His mother groomed him perfectly to be the perfect politician until the time came to strike. You see, with the good graces that came from Indech and Eru marrying, the Tuatha Dé Danann and the Fabhara put aside their differences for a little while and decided to fight their common foe, the natives on the island, the Fir Bolg. Eventually, the Fir Bolg were put down, but at the cost of the king of the Tuatha Dé Danann's arm, Nuada. Now that Nuada was one arm less, he had to step down as king, as it was tradition that only the unblemished could rule the land. So they had to hold an election for the new king. And that's when Breis began to shine. He went around and suddenly he was everyone's best friend. He shook the right hands. He smiled at the right jokes. He greased the right palms. He told them that he could give them anything provided he had the power to do so, such as if he was king, perhaps. Election day came and he won on a very pro-Fabhara stance. The pro-foe stance dictated that by encouraging positive relations with the Fabhara, they would be able to make suggestions and control the single market along the island. And people seemed to go along with this. But unfortunately, after winning the election, Breis found that while he was perfectly equipped to win an election, ruling a country was a very, very different matter. Trade agreement after trade agreement fell against him. He lost argument after argument with the Fabhara until eventually he had to give over more than half of the people's cattle every year. Obviously, the people of Ireland were not too happy with Breis about this, so they rose up in rebellion. An angry mob of the pitchfork-wielding kind stormed his dún, and he was driven from Ireland by a crowd of angry youths swearing anti-government slogans and inaccurately wearing Che Guevara t-shirts for some reason. And he had to flee to Tory Island, where he stayed with the war chief Balor of the Evil Eye, one of the prominent Fabhara leaders, and they planned an invasion of Ireland. Meanwhile, back in Ireland, the revolution began to calm down slightly, and after the usual purging of the socialist elements, the revolutionaries got about electing a new king. That's where Lugh comes in. Lugh, love father, Lugh of the long arm, Simil Donach, the talented bastard. We all know a Lugh from school. Straight A's. Champion athlete, total babe. One of those ones who graduated with perfect grades in college, got a job in advertising immediately, and now runs his own business, drives a Tesla, and he's a nice guy. Shows up at your school reunion, really happy to see you and genuinely interested in how you're doing. Fuck you, Dave! Sorry. Anyway, Lugh was the perfect candidate. Where Breis was all talk, he was all action. Lugh ran on a very anti-Fabhara stance. The fuck Fav stance managed to carry the day. He won the victory, even though a terrible scandal emerged about him actually being the grandson of Balor of the Evil Eye. After Balor died in battle, that was quickly swept under the rug, and soon Breis found himself trumped up on charges of treason with Lugh as judge. Thankfully, the family connections managed to secure Breis an excellent lawyer who managed to get him off the death penalty, but he had to give up the secret of how to sow and reap harvests, which apparently he was the only one who knew how to do properly in the land. And so endeth the career of Breis.
Or that's one version of how the career of Breis ended.
Never told quite like that.
It's the truest, most accurate version, I'll have you know.
I just love that with like all of these stories, there's always another version. And then there's the one with the poet.
Always.
Oh yeah. Mhm.
Nah, Querbra.
Don't mess with poets.
If
Yeah.
there's one lesson I take from Irish mythology, it's don't mess with poets.
Oh, I wonder who was telling these stories.
Though there have been or no, that didn't mention poets.
Oh,
It was a charm found, I can't remember where in Ireland, but it was for protection specifically and in order against the curses, and this is in order of priority, against the curses of women, smiths, and druids.
Smiths were serious business.
But yeah, I mean, sword or like rocks go in, swords come out. That looks like magic.
It
Yep.
is magic. I don't know how they do it. Like, basically, as far as I'm concerned, most people working in any form of science are basically magicians. I don't know how electricity works.
yeah.
How does the internet work? I don't know how I'm seeing myself on a phone. This isn't possible.
You see, there's this little team of gremlins.
That makes sense to me.
They trained them up for years and years and years, and then they locked them inside the phone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
You
they
have
run
to
on little
unlock them to get
treadmills.
to work.
And they
Yeah.
feed them apples.
You lost me at the apples. That seems a bit strange. Gremlins surely would be a carnivorous creature.
And every time you drop your phone, a gremlin dies. And the only way to revive them is to say, I do believe in gremlins. I do.
Actually, what you're supposed to do is hum the theme tune from the iconic 80s movie.
Yeah, but who knows that off by heart?
Oh, yeah, and that's why you're not meant to get them wet. So, do you think if they just put Gizmo in a bowl of rice?
That's what he should have done. Would have solved everything.
Then he might swallow some after midnight.
Yeah.
Yeah, but raw
True.
rice.
Vicious cycle.
All right. Who's telling a story next?
I think it's me. I think we've had enough silliness there.
Yeah. Oh, you've been.
All right.
That's a good one.
Okay, this one has something of a content warning. We've had stories in the past that had a lot of sexual content. This one doesn't actually have any sexual activity, but I'm still giving it a content warning for being extremely horny. Oh, do we have any monster fuckers in the audience tonight? Because if we do, this is a story for you. Now, Joseph Fennelly, he lived in the town of Richmond in County Galway, and one day he received some news that was at the same time very sad, but also very foreboding. You see, his uncle had passed away recently, and Joseph was to inherit his house. Now, this was a lovely big house. It had 3 floors, lots of rooms, and it was in very good condition for its age. Anyone would have been delighted to live there. Except for one thing. This was the 3rd time that year that a member of the Fennelly family had inherited this particular house. It was said to be haunted. And every time a new owner moved in, they were found the next day laying in the bed of the master bedroom without their head. And so Joseph thought to himself, how can I keep this lovely new house, but also hold on to my own head? And he devised a plan. He took out an ad in every newspaper in Ireland, saying that anyone who spent one night in his house would get £300 the next morning. Thinking to himself that anyone who survived to claim the money the next day would have sorted the problem out for him, and that was surely worth £300. Now, of course, many people came from all over Ireland. Every one of them tried staying in the house, and every single one of them was found the next morning laying in the bed of the master bedroom without a head on their shoulders. Until one man came. Now, this man was named Michael Dwyer. He accepted the offer. He went into the house. He sat down in an armchair by the fire. He started reading a book he'd brought with him to while away the hours. And he seemed to be getting very comfortable, very cozy. He was very happy there, and he thought this was the easiest money he'd ever made in his life. Until around about 11 o'clock at night, he started hearing footsteps coming from upstairs. That didn't surprise him too much. He'd heard the house was haunted. He had come expecting to hear something like that. But there was another sound. A sound that seemed familiar, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. It sounded like swish, thump, swish, thump, swish, thump. And as the night drew in and the sound continued, he decided it was time to investigate. So he went out into the hallway and he looked up the staircase. And as the clock struck midnight, a figure burst from a doorway onto the landing and stared down at Mike. The figure was that of a man, stark naked and covered head to toe in thick black fur, with a dog's tail behind him, wagging back and forth, making a sound like swish, thump, swish, thump. To Michael's surprise, the dog man didn't have a look of anger or outrage at Michael's presence here, but a look of friendliness. The dog man looked at him and he said, "Oh, well, thank God someone's here tonight. Thank God there's someone here. Listen, I'm covered in this stuff, absolutely covered in it. It's getting very uncomfortable. It's itchy, it's hot. Would you do me a favor, please, and shave it off for me?" And so Michael, he thought to himself, well, I'm not sure about this, but look, it's probably best I go along with it. Probably best I don't make him angry. And he says, all right, yeah. If you've got the equipment, just take me to a bathroom. I'll do it. I'll shave the fur off you. So the dog man walks down the stairs and takes Michael by the hand. He leads Michael through the house, through the hallways and the rooms, to a huge bathroom, warmly lit by flickering candlelight, with a vast metal basin full of steaming water, scented with lavender and sandalwood. And upon a towel lay a straight razor, a brush, and a big, very, very big bowl of shaving cream. And Michael, he sat himself upon a stool, and he motioned for the dog man to stand in front of him. He took the straight razor, and tenderly he began to shave the dog man. The cold steel of the razor scraping softly against his pliant flesh. As Michael's fingers ran up and down the dog man's thigh, he began to whine and whimper in pleasure. Michael's knuckles on his hands with the razor softly caressed the dog man's back, and the dog man's leg began to kick and twitch as a dog's might when you scratch it behind the ear. Firmly but gently, Michael took the dog man's hip and turned him around to continue on the front. And as he gently, tenderly shaved the dog man, it began to seem like the dog man had not one but two tails, one behind and another to the front, and both of them wagging. They began to lose themselves in time. They couldn't tell how long had passed, and before long, the dog man stood clean shaven before Michael, the candlelight glistening on his wet flesh. And he said, "Michael, please don't stop. Will you shave my tail as well?" And so Michael gripped him gently upon the tail and began to shave it. When he was halfway up the tail, the dog man bolted, running as fast as he could, galloping out of the bathroom, back through the hallways, and Michael found that he was not able to let go of the tail. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't let it go. He was being dragged behind the dog man through the house, up the stairs towards the bedroom. And he thought to himself, "Oh no, is this what happened to the others? Is this what happened to my uncle? I don't want to lose my head. I don't want to die." And he did the only thing he could think of. He took the straight razor that was still in his other hand and he cut off the dog man's tail. The dog man screamed, not just in agony, but in betrayal. He turned and he ran back down the stairs and out the door, just as the sun was rising. Several hours later, Joseph Fennelly arrived to check on how Michael had done. He found Michael still sitting in that same spot upon the stairs, cradling the bloody dog man's tail and weeping. He had won the £300, but at what cost? Yeah, there we go.
Yep, you're the one who made me pull the face. I'm just
Emily's
really
pulling
hoping
I'm pulling the face.
Was the dog man
there's
going
no
to
one
hurt him?
listening, any of my family members just walking by and going, "What?"
What was that, Nisha?
Was the dog man going to hurt him?
Not in my version.
Good. Oh, it's a
mean,
beautiful relationship.
You said it was like horny, but Jesus Christ.
Well, I was wondering if you meant like horns.
No, I did
Not a
not.
chance.
You know what you should do now? You should record that for Literotica. There's a market out there somewhere for that.
Oh, no, I feel like
that's
it's a
an
prequel to The
ASMR
Shape of Water.
Well, I know
Or-
that
Wanna
there's
get-
a genre of dinosaur romances.
Oh God, I should talk to Chuck Tingle. All
Is
the
it just
events.
me, or are we just basically...
No, go on, Nisha.
Are we just turning into like an erotic podcast? Are we just erotic myths and legends now? Are we just going to get a horde of like Stephanie Meyer fangirls logging on?
Tell
Albert
me
Hack.
about
He's
the
like
time
Robert
the
Pattinson, but
Dullahan-
short.
Tell me about the time the Dullahan whipped the banshee.
The only thing I actually added to that story really was was Michael being very sad at the end. The rest of the events I may have gone into more detail, but that's what happened in the story in the Irish Folklore Archive.
And
You
does the
told
dog
the
man
truth
show
of
up
the
anywhere
tale.
else?
I had a look very briefly. There's a couple of stories. They're usually far more trickstery, a little bit more puka-ish. There's no other instance that I could find that was that homoerotic.
They could well be a puka, because I think it's in Wicklow, the puka often appears as just a regular dog.
Yeah, I was thinking they might be like a subset of puka.
No,
Horny
Niamh, you're
subset.
confusing the puka with yourself again.
Don't blow my cover.
So who's next?
I think it's me.
Something nice and sanitary, perhaps?
Certainly compared to dogmen. Right. Okay. I forbid you maidens all that wear gold in your hair to come or go by Carter Hall, for young Tamlin is there. Of those that go to Carter Hall, to him they leave a pledge, either their mantles of green or else their maidenhead. This was the warning that Janet had heard over and over again. She had heard it as she sat in her bower, sewing with a silver needle and a silken thread. She had heard it in her father's hall, as 24 gentlemen played chess. She had heard it whispered in the dark. Do not go to Carter Hall, for Tamlin is there. She had heard the warnings, but she had not heeded them. Carter Hall was a wooded area, an area on the border between Scotland and England, and once it had belonged to her family, and she felt it should be hers by right of inheritance. But no man or woman went to Carter Hall. The borderlands, they were wild. One could expect to find thieves and brigands there, but also the Fae. Janet, though, she had no fear of men of this world or men of the other. So one day she hitched her green mantle up to her knee and set off to Carter Hall. She took with her a knife at her belt, and she wandered through the woodland, marveling at the beauty. What men had left, nature had reclaimed. Wildflowers and mushrooms grew in the shelter of the trees, and she smelt a sweet smell, a perfume of roses. She followed the scent and she found the roses, beautiful, lush double roses, roses of white and red, roses that were two flowers in one. She stretched out her hand to pluck one of these roses, but as her fingers curved on the stem, someone called out, "Lady, pull no more." The voice, it was strong, it was young, it was male, and when Janet turned, she knew who it was she was speaking to. It was Tamlin. "What made you come here, lady? What made you try to take that rose? How dare you come to Carter Hall without asking leave of me?" Janet, though, felt no fear. She snatched back her hand from where the man had grabbed it. "Carter Hall is not yours, and as for roses, there are many. I shall come and go wherever I please. I shall not ask leave of you or of any man." Tamlin, the elfin shade, the knight of the fairylands who haunted this place, was astonished. No one had ever spoken to him like this. You can't do that," he said, as Janet plucked the rose and tucked it behind her hair. You have to pay a price. Anyone who comes here must pay a price." "The price I pay for coming here is paid by my own 2 feet," said Janet, and she left. She went back to her father's hall, went back to her bower, sat sewing with her silver needle and her silken thread, but her mind was full of roses, the intoxicating smell of the flowers, and her mind was full of Tamlin, and she went back again. She went back to Carter Hall with her mantle hitched up to her knee. She walked through the woods drawn forth by the smell of roses. She stretched out her hand and plucked again a double rose. "You come again," said the voice she knew. And what price shall you pay this time, lady? Another price from your feet? No, said Janet. The price I pay for this rose shall be a kiss. And so she took Tam Lim by the hand and drew him down to her own rose lips. She took him by the sleeve and laid him down among the roses and among the grasses green. And Tam Lim, he took her, and she took him. And Janet left, and Janet came, and Janet left and went and came as she pleased. So this might have continued, had Janet's father not noticed a change in her. As she walked among his 24 knights, he saw she was paler than milk. He saw that her green mantle seemed tighter about her waist. He noticed how in the morning she could eat no food, though her appetite would always return later in the day. Janet's father took her quietly aside and asked, "My dear, I think you go with child. Tell me, is it to a man of might or to a man of means you have given your heart? Who among my gentlemen shall give the babe its name?" Janet turned paler than even her father could believe, paler than glass. "Father, there is no man here that I would treat so well. There is none among your gentlemen that can give this child a name." With tears in her eyes, Janet ran from her father's hall, fled from the hall and fled to Carter Hall. But this time it was not sweet roses she was seeking. Janet went among the weeds and the thorns, looking for that poisoned purple flower. She found it, plucked it, and again her hand was grasped and a voice cried, "Lady, pull no more." A voice she knew, a voice that was strong and young. "What makes you pull that poisoned flower? Do you not know what that flower is, what it would do to you and the babe you carry?" Janet snatched back her hand and the flower. "Oh, I know well this herb, Tam Lim. I have no wish to carry the thing you have got with me. If you were a man of flesh and not an elfin shade, then maybe I might love this child. But I know not what this creature of the fairy you are growing in me will be, and I will not bear it." Tam Lin's voice grew quiet. It took on a tone and a shade Janet had not seen. "That is what you think of me. What you think I am. Perhaps I will be, but before. I tell you, Janet, I was born of mortal woman and mortal flesh. Once I was an earthly knight, but as I went riding, I fell from my horse, and the Queen of Fairy caught me. Since then, her I have served, and here I have dwelled, but what? Janet, all is pleasant in the fairy land, but there is an eerie tale they tell, that once on every 7 years they must pay a tithe to hell. The 7th year is coming round, and I, being young and full of flesh, I fear I this year shall be the tithe." "No," spoke Janet before her mind had time to catch up with her mouth. "No. If I'm bearing this child, it will have a father. Tell me, Tam Lim, how to win you back from Fairy." "They say that those their true love would win can do so. But you must be determined, Janet. Do you wish me to be the father of your child? If you do, you must wait on Hallows Eve. Wait until you see the fairy folk riding by. You shall see them on their horses of black and brindle and grey and brown, and me among their number, riding on white, for as I was an earthly knight, I am still given that renown. You must pull me from your horse and hold me tight. Hold me tight and fear me not, though they shall turn me into many a hideous thing. You must hold me and not fear me and not let me go, and then perhaps I will be saved from hell and from the service of the Fairy Queen. And if you will let me, Janet, I will be the father of your child." They parted that night, and they parted tenderly. And on the night of Hallows Eve, Janet went to the Mill's Cross and waited. She saw the fairy folk go riding by. She saw the Fairy Queen, dressed in spiders' webs, with diamonds of dewdrops hung from her hair. She saw the fairy ladies, the fairy gentlemen, and all the creatures of the fae go riding past, and among their number, riding upon a white horse, just as he said, was Tam Lim. Her Tam Lim. Janet pulled him from his horse. She wrapped her arms and her cloak about him and held him tight. She closed her eyes, but she felt him change. She felt his shape grow larger, hairier, spikier, smaller, slithery, smooth, rough. She felt him change into a million terrible things, but still she held him tight and feared him not. This was her Tam Lim. This was the man she had chosen. This was the man who would be the father of her child, who would be her husband. This was her choice, and she held him tight and feared him not. And at last, with a shriek and a shudder, she held in her arms a naked man. Janet wrapped him in her cloak, and she took him home. That's the story.
Excellent.
That was actually nice.
Yeah, I choose not to do the rape version.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. That was
Why
lovely.
do so many good romance stories from both folklore and mythology require the caveat, I choose the non-rape version?
Because a lot of them were recorded by people who I think were trying to excuse some of their own behavior.
Like even my man Hades and Persephone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a nice version where it's like, oh, mum, I've been totally kidnapped. I'm definitely not into an older gentleman. And then there's the pervy, I'm basically your horny great uncle. Come here to me.
I'm not sure of the veracity of it, but I have been told that symbolic kidnappings were part of the ancient Greek wedding.
I think they were in Sparta.
Oh, yeah.
The bride also would shave her head and dress as a man to show that she was not in any way his inferior.
Yes, you do.
Because,
I mean, that would help if I was having to propose.
what if they shaved their head first?
That's intimidating.
Okay.
Really? I find women with shaved heads kind of terrifying.
Yeah.
In the like, you're able to do that, therefore you could crush me.
Yeah.
I can see it, but there's something soothing about the egg shape.
You're just holding on to the myth of Samson really hard, aren't you, Nisha?
Yeah, that's a
try.
kinky story. He keeps asking Delilah to tie him up in various different ways.
Oh.
Well, after that.
Okay. So for my story, right? You know what? I'm gonna ask each of you to give me a thing to put into a story.
All right. A teapot.
A hand.
Okay.
A bear.
Teapot, a hand, and a bear. Okay, and my ending is the flames rose higher and the wicked place was destroyed.
Good ending.
Okay, so a teapot, a hand, and a bear. Okay. Once, there was a girl, just an ordinary girl. She lived in a home with her mother. Now, her mother and the girl had only one thing that they could sell, and that was tea. They brewed teas of all types: nettle tea, rose tea, juniper tea. And sometimes the teas did strange things to people. If someone was ill, or if someone had gotten themselves in trouble, as we say in Ireland, the teas would help, the teas would sort things. And the mother, she taught the girl all of the ways and means to brew the teas, why they would be brewed, how they would be brewed. All but one. There was one tea that the mother never showed the girl. It was kept in a little black box up in the rafters of their home. The girl asked about the tea, and the mother said, "No, no, that's not for you to know, and that's not for me to tell." The girl, well, she put her curiosity aside, but every now and then she'd look up into the rafters and wonder, what was that tea for? What would it do? One night, in and around her 16th birthday, she awoke and she couldn't get back to sleep. She got out of bed, went out the door, and walked around the house, looking at the lavender and the roses, and the thyme and the rosemary, all of the ingredients they would use in their teas. Then she thought about the tea that she shouldn't know about, that she shouldn't ask questions about, that sat in the rafters of her home. While her mother was asleep. She wouldn't know if she just had a peek at the tea, smelt it. So the girl, she climbed up into the rafters, crawled along a beam, and picked up the tiny little box. And on the lid of the box, there was a picture, worn almost smooth, but she could just about make it out. It was a picture of a bear. Taking the little box of tea down, she brewed up a pot of water. She poured that water into the teapot, then taking just a few little leaves of the tea, gently crumbled them in. As she let the tea brew, she could see that it wasn't ordinary steam coming from it. It looked almost like smoke. It was strange colours, these greens, these browns, these oranges, coming out through the spout of the teapot. And as she smelt the tea, a strange thing happened. She didn't just smell the forest and the trees and the flowers. It was like she was smelling a memory. She saw herself as a huge bear walking through the forest, and she saw little cubs running after her. She felt the water of the river as the bear dove in. She felt the salmon in her mouth as it bit. And she stepped back from the teapot. And she was herself again, and she was in her home. Her hands shaking only slightly, she picked up the teapot and poured the tea. While she'd come this far, she might as well see it through. She took the tea, held it up to her nose, and again she was in the bear, and the bear was in the forest, but the forest was dark now. It was icy cold and snowy. The girl, she took first sip of the tea. She felt something change inside her. She took another sip and she began to feel heavier. Her head grew larger. And her hands, no, not hands, paws, they began to spread out beneath her. She twisted and she turned. Then when she looked down at herself, she wasn't the girl anymore. She was a bear. She thundered out of that place and ran through the forest, and she saw that the forest was like how she had seen it as a bear. It was icy, it was cold, it was dark. She turned around, looking towards home. But it wasn't home anymore. It was a different place. It was the place where she had been trapped. No, not her, the bear. No, her, the bear. She had been trapped in a tiny little box in the rafters of a house where there lived a woman who brewed teas. She looked at what was home but now was not, and she remembered the fire that she had used to boil the water to brew the tea that she hadn't doused. She saw the fire spreading to the outside of the house, and then up the walls of the house, and to the thatch of the roof. The flames rose higher and higher, and the wicked place that was her home was destroyed.
That's an alternative version of Brave.
Yeah. Yeah, that was fun.
I love those Once Upon a Time cards.
Yeah, they're so great. Like, even just for coming up with ideas for stories.
Mhm.
Like, especially if you're stuck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've played with them in ages.
Yeah. I just opened my Once Upon a Time thing, and like I've been looking for my copy of Werewolves for ages, and it was
I love
inside
werewolves.
Once Upon a Time.
I actually made for the museum a set that was Changeling.
Oh.
Nice.
They appeared, they were used one Christmas and then they disappeared,
Oh, I
Of course they
I
did.
remember that actually, yeah.
just like the Changeling,
Probably went down the well at some point.
probably.
Everything ends up down the well.
There's
eventually.
a spear in that basement.
There's a lot of things in that basement.
Yeah,
A spear,
yeah.
you say?
there's lots of weird shit there. Like, so much. Including ghosts.
And haunted shit.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. I think
Miss
the mirror's
Frankie.
been removed.
I
Good.
don't know where it's been put because the owner of the mirror wasn't allowed to take it home.
It belongs in a museum.
With museum. Right. Stories. Who's got more stories?
Well, given the time of year it is, I think it's only fair that we talk a bit about Odin, the All-Father. As we all know. Huh?
I just had to say Santa. He is the original Santa. And no one can tell me otherwise.
I'm not even going to discuss the connection with Father Christmas, because if I do, I will probably give... Well, in fairness, there's no children listening, so they can have all the nightmares they want. But Odin the All-Father was a man who liked knowledge. He was thirsty for it, some might say. You see, in the Norse mind, the worlds, well, all 9 of them, were located within Yggdrasil, the world tree. At the very top, its branches caressed Asgard, where the Aesir lived, and at the very, very bottom, unfathomably far down, its roots were in the Well of Urd. Now, that well held many terrifying, ancient, powerful things, but nothing more ancient and powerful than the Norns. The Norns, the 3 maidens, were the ones who carved the runes that commanded fate into the bark of Yggdrasil. And from high above in Asgard, Odin looked down, watching as the Norns carved their runes. He wanted to know the secrets of the runes for himself. To control fate was to control everything. To know about fate was to know all. So Odin began the long, long journey down to the roots of Yggdrasil. There he gazed into the Well of Urn. But the runes would not reveal themselves. Odin knew they'd require a sacrifice. So he took out a rope and fashioned a noose. He placed the rope about his neck, threw it over one of Yggdrasil's roots, and began to pull. As the rope tightened on his neck, he felt his throat close until only a bare hiss of air could pass in and out of his lungs. He hoisted himself up high, tied the rope, and there he hung. Gasping for air, he gazed back into the well. But still, the ruins would not reveal themselves. So Odin took down his spear, Gungnir, placed it into the roots of Yggdrasil. Propping it up, he once again hoisted himself higher and higher, till he lined the tip of Gungnir to his ribs. And he slowly lowered himself back down, as first the spear cracked through his ribs, then his lungs. Passing by his beating heart, he could feel the cold metal as his heart thumped and thumped, as his blood oozed down the length of Gungnir, soaking the roots of Yggdrasil. He gazed down at the well, but still Odin saw nothing. The ruins would not reveal themselves. So there he hung, barely able to breathe, his lungs shredded, his blood oozing down to the roots below. He stayed there for 9 days. He did not eat a bite, did not drink a sup. Until finally, on the 9th day, he felt the last of his life oozing out of him. He felt his last breath coming and willed his lungs to fill for a final time. His lips moved, saying words of sacrifice and dedication. He looked down at the well of Erd. The waters were still black. Even now, the ruins would not reveal themselves. As Odin's eyes slowly glassed over, he felt the last trickle of life leave him. And so Odin, the All-Father, died. And then light flashed back into his eyes. His lungs filled with air, his blood oozed back into his body as the All-Father was reborn. And as he looked down below, he saw the ruins shining. They revealed their terrible knowledge to him as Odin, the All-Father, completed the ultimate sacrifice, himself to himself. The ruins showed him many things. A world consumed by ice and then consumed by fire. The jaws of a wolf closing on the moon, the jaws of a wolf closing on him, and then blackness. Odin thought he would be satisfied with this knowledge, but he knew there was still more to be had. In fact, someone said he'd give his left eye to have it, but that's another story.
Stephen, I feel there might be a question on everyone's list, but you're not secretly Odin, are you?
Ron I.
Okay. I'm dyslexic and also like the screens.
That's exactly what Loki would say.
Unfortunately, I no longer have a Corvid companion.
Oh.
Okay. So we had a bit of a story with some water there. I'm desperately clutching at straws trying to find a connecting theme. There was water in that story. There's water in mine as well. Christ. So Fionn McCool and the Fianna, as was their wont, they were fucking around at Loch Derg. And they came upon some bones just lying there in the grass by Loch Derg. And they were standing there just kind of scratching themselves, wondering, what the fuck? Like, where'd this come from? And then a Fear Darrig wandered up. And he said, sure, look, did you not kill her yourselves the last time you were here? If you had a trace of a conscience between you, you'd have remembered that Now listen, there's a worm somewhere in those bones, a little red worm. And you'd better do something about it, because if it manages to get enough to drink, it'll turn into a huge monster and destroy countless people. And most of the Fianna, they were thinking, oh yeah, we'd better do something about that. Maybe we should burn those bones. But Colleen Ware, the little shit that he was, he took the pommel of his sword and he smashed up the bones until he saw a little red caterpillar wriggle out of one of them. So he speared it on the tip of his sword. He took it between his fingers and he fucked it into the middle of Loch Derg. 5 seconds later, a gigantic paste erupted out of Loch Derg, to the surprise of absolutely no one. The Fianna, they did their best. They fought hard. They fought with all of the valor and the strength that they could muster. But the paste, its skin, it was impregnable. And so Fionn, reverting back to his childhood, stuck his thumb in his mouth. And doing so, he regained all the wisdom humanity has ever had, which on reflection at that point wasn't very much. And he realized that the worm, the paste, it had one weak spot, a mole on its stomach. And that if it was pierced there, it would surely be defeated. The catch, of course, was that this mole wasn't on the outside, it was inside the paste's stomach. So Fionn, he ordered another attack on the paste, and he let his followers dodge and parry as much as they wanted, but he stood there firm, waiting for the paste to swallow him up. And when it did, he ran down the gullet, and he came upon 200 people, women, men, and children, and others of assorted various things, all alive, wondering, can we get out of here, please? Why aren't we dead? And 100 others who were dead, or at least may as well have been dead. Some were half digested. They probably should have just been killed at that point, honestly. It would have been kinder. But Fionn, he ignored all of this, ignored everyone, ignored the corpses and the near dying, and he went in search of that one specific mole. And finding it, he hacked and he slashed and he cut open a doorway in the side of the paste, and he told everyone to get the fuck out. So everyone, they scrambled out of the hole Fionn had just carved in the side of the paste, and Fionn went with them. And the paste, it bled, and it bled, and it bled. And a day later, it was still bleeding. And a week later, it was still bleeding. And it was still bleeding by the time St. Patrick got there. And rather than patch up the hole in the poor creature, Patrick condemned it to spend the rest of eternity at the bottom of Loch Derg, along with all of the other lake monsters that are supposed to be living down there at the bottom of Loch Derg. Congestion must be awful. And that is the story of the Fianna and the paste of Loch Derg.
I do love how sometimes the Fianna, they're like a D&D party who are like, this is a bad idea, but it's plot.
Wow.
I have not even practiced telling that one.
It's brilliant.
It's fantastic. So Conor Wales, the guy who's most often getting them into traps and responsible for total party kills then.
Yeah.
Oh, I miss playing D&D.
Yeah.
I miss playing D&D.
I'd like to play a game.
Hey, let's do a campaign.
We should do a campaign with all of us here.
There's an orc I've been wanting to play for years.
Ooh.
An orcish bard raised by elves named Sebastian Stoat Gobbler.
Exactly what kind of stouts is he gobbling?
The muscletades, the relatives of the otters.
I
So
was
kind of literal
like
stout. then.
a half orc cleric who her backstory was her father was a blind bard who played the trumpet, with her mother having no idea that her mother was an orc. Fell
Just
madly
very
in love.
cool.
Yeah. And then one winter it got a little bit too cold and the mother ate the father.
Oh,
Ah,
Yeah.
and is that how she became pregnant?
No,
That's how
I
it
don't
works
think
in
I went
Irish
into
myth.
quite that detail,
Yep.
but we're going Irish myth-wise, yeah.
Yeah, because in Irish mythology, conception is only achievable if you swallow an insect or a worm or something.
Yeah.
as we
Or-
all know, the Irish monks were all war fetishists.
Or if you sat in the seat where a pregnant lady had just sat and you didn't
You'll catch the
yourself-
pregnant.
Yeah, you didn't hit yourself in the arse like 3 times.
Or that filthy story about, I think it's Cormac MacArth. It's
Which
more
one?
an anecdote than a story, but Cormac MacArth was, he was the wisest high king Ireland had ever had, which sounds great until you realise what Egypt some of the other kings were.
Mhm.
He's referred to as like the Irish Solomon. He would go around and he
Yeah.
could give judgments and things. In his early days of kingship, he made a few mistakes, like accidentally promising his wife and children to the fairies. Whoops. But, as he matured, he became wise, and people would go to him with their problems. And one day, a woman came to him and said, I'm pregnant. And he said, well, either congratulations or commiserations. And she said, no, the thing is, I haven't been with a man. Are you sure? I mean, like, I've heard people say this, but no, seriously, I have never been with a man. I have no interest in men at all. So I have no idea how this has happened. And Cormac thought, okay, yeah, you I mean, even with the whole swallowing worms things, there generally needs to be a man at least near, at least to watch. And so he said, I know you haven't been with a man, but in the last few months, have you been with a woman? And she said, oh yeah, I've been with loads of women. And he's like, okay. Any of these women you've been with, have they been with a man sort of right before they were with you? And she was like, actually, yeah. And Cormac was like, well, I'm going to take you over here and we're going to have a little bit of a biology lesson. And thus, he solved the problem of the miracle pregnancy. It's a bit of an anticlimax story. That's what
I think she might disagree. I've always
some
liked
kind
that
of
one.
like some kind of vaginal snowballing or something.
I
Yeah.
don't know about the details.
It is possible for that to happen.
It is.
Yeah.
Hmm.
If orifices are being dealt with
Interchanged.
time. Yeah.
Like
Fluids,
if you're grinding vaginas together, substances might leak out.
or just, hands.
Yeah.
I also assume you'd want some gravity on your side.
Not sure if gravity was on her side per se.
Irish sex education system, ladies and gentlemen.
And the moral of the story is it's always possible to get pregnant.
Yeah.
Moral
Get pregnant
of the
and
story
die.
is
away.
sex before marriage is a sin. There's just so many weird births in Irish mythology. Like I like the one with Crahor McNess's birth
Oh yeah. It's like sit on a
with the
rock.
stone.
Yeah.
What's
I love
today
how
good
She
for?
was a wilf.
What's today good for? A day to conceive.
Getting a son into a king.
Right. Come here.
Again,
I just
that's
like the idea
non-
that that's Catboat's pickup line. He just goes around the place, finding
Yeah.
maidens bathing in the river, and just goes, "You know what today is good for?"
Yeah.
Birthing.
Again, we have the
How
caveat
would you
of
like to ride my staff of divination.
That is the non-rape version of the story.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Should we compile a list? Should we compile a list of Irish mythological pickup lines?
Oh, we
Oh, yeah.
definitely
Oh,
should.
yeah.
Okay, so we've got It's a Good Day for Conceiving Sons.
Mhm.
I see two
That's a-
hills I'd rest my spear between.
Yeah, I was about to say that.
That's a fine-looking cow passing before me.
Sure, it's well to be fine when the heifers have got no bulls to bother them.
Could you shave me, please?
I'm an ugly old woman. Can I share your blanket?
That's a surprisingly common one.
Yeah. Other mythological pickup lines. I'm Zeus and I'm a swan.
It's okay, I'm a major
Oh.
deity.
I need someone to suck this rock out of my womb.
Oh, yeah.
The friendship of my thighs.
You'll totally be a virgin afterwards, I swear.
Which one was that?
That was Jehovah.
Ah, oh, what deep and angry eyes you have, Freya. Oh, look how much you can eat, Freya.
Basically anything the Dagda has ever said, ever.
Have you seen how big my staff is?
Would you like a swing of me club?
Oh, God.
You want to bite of what's in me cauldron?
Yeah.
Are you
How
not
about you
braver than
come
this
here?
drop of water on my thigh?
Remove
How
your
about-
hand for the capacity of my genitals is great.
Oh dear.
Don't worry, I stretch.
Just
I
the
know you're my
entire-
mother, but it's okay.
Just the entire idea of the Morrigan washing her hair with a foot either side of a river.
It could be a small river.
It could be.
It was a small river. No, what? Oh, I love this. I'm geeking out about it. Okay. So, yes, it is a small river because we know what the river is. It
Yep.
is a river that, yeah, it's wide distance, but you could stand with your legs well spread across it. But I read a fascinating book about the Tuatha De Danann, or it's an article in a book about the Tuatha De Danann, claiming that they must have been giants because
Yeah.
passages describe them standing astride rivers. So surely the Morrigan was this big, massive beast of a woman that's the type that floated down the whole length of the river. It's a tiny trickle of a pond, lads.
Yeah.
Of course she could stand astride it. She didn't have to be bigger than 6 foot tall.
Like it's still big enough that it's vaguely suggestive, but
Oh, it's completely
she wasn't a
suggestive.
giant.
It's like Cirque du Soleil burlesque style. But
Yeah, but I mean, in any of the manuscripts, anytime a woman is brushing or washing her hair, that's seen as being suggestive.
yeah,
because it's
yeah.
And there's some sort of obsession that the Irish people have with pubic hair hanging down to the knees. It has been mentioned on no less than 5 separate occasions in things I've read. 3 times to do with the Morrigan.
At least twice to do with the Dagda.
Gone completely off topic. Wonderful.
Of course.
And of course,
We're
there's
always observing.
kissing contests. Show how virile you are. Literal
Well, that just
kissing
makes
contests.
sense.
Yeah.
I suppose we should probably tell one of these stories rather than just talking about them.
Talking about them, yeah.
Someone tell the pissing contest story.
Oh, wait. We got one. We got a suggestion in the comments.
Oh,
Loki, just a
Oh.
second. Let me shapeshift. I'd love a ride on that horse. All right.
Right, pissing contests.
So
I
who's
don't know
doing
the
that?
story well enough.
You don't know the
completely
story?
forgotten I know the story, but I've completely forgotten all of the names.
Oh, Duvergal,
Duvergal.
Cuchulainn Lugod, Luad.
Luad. So Duvergal and Luad get married. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, here we
yeah.
go. Okay, pissing
Okay.
contest. Right. So there was a woman called Duvergal. She was from roughly approximately Scandinavia-ish. It's never really said exactly where she is. But she hears of Cuchulainn and she's thinking, oh, I'll have a bit of that. Yeah, that sounds like my type of guy, flies into a rage for no reason and then kills everyone. Love it. So she decides to fly over. Now, she doesn't take Aer Lingus or Ryanair or anything like that. No, she changes herself into a swan, I want to say. I'm gonna say a big bird. She changes herself into a big bird, right? So she's on her way over and she has her 2 handmaidens with her who are attached to her with gold chains. And then she spies in the distance, there's the man I'm looking for. That's him. Right, I'll fly right towards him. But you see, Cuchulainn and his mate Luad, well, they're kind of foster brothers, but let's call them mates, yeah? Mates. They're out trying to catch some birds. They see these birds that look just like birds and not like women. And, well, Cuchulainn says to Luad, go on, try to catch it. And he gets a slingshot. He puts it out there and it doesn't hit. But Cuchulainn then takes his slingshot and it hits Duvergal right in the side. So she comes tumbling down and her handmaids come tumbling down. And, well, she's lying there. She turns back into a woman. The handmaids, for some reason, they remain as birds because that was it was a fashion statement at the time to wear 2 birds around your neck, like you're kind of coming home from hunting pheasant and you're one of those upper class English people. Yeah, like that. So Duvergal falls down anyway. And then Cuchulainn comes over and he's like, oh, Jesus, sorry about that. Looks like I've stuck a rock right in your room. And she's like, yeah, you have. Do you mind taking it out? So, she's lying there prostrate on the ground. And Cuchulainn's like, right, well, needs must. So he gets down between her legs. And, he really goes for it. He's giving it socks, giving it everything. And she's lying there going, oh, no, it's not quite out yet. Oh, no, Until finally, well, everyone is quite relieved to see that the stone is out of her room and she's perfectly all right, if a little bit shaky and fluttery. Then she says, right, Cuchulainn, came all the way over here because I want to marry you. What do you think of that? And he's like, well, I've gotten everything I can out of you, stone in the womb wise. And I don't think it'd be very right for me to marry you. But look, here's my mate. Will you meet me mate, Luad? And she's like, you know what, all right. He's not a bad looking man. Sure, why not? I'll go for it. So off they go, toddling on, they get married, right? Now, Duvergal doesn't really fit in with the local women too well, being foreign and all that. Irish people can be a little bit xenophobic from time to time. Just a tad, yeah. So Duvergal, she tries to make the best of it. She's a good enough wife to Luad, and then it's winter time, right? And all the women, they're getting excited for their annual, well, festivities. And by festivities, I mean pissing contests. So why do they have these pissing contests? Well, it's said that the capacity of a woman's bladder is directly proportional to how absolutely gorgeous they are and how good they are in bed. The more piss you can piss, the bigger of an animal you are in the sack. So how do they measure this pissing contest? They wait until winter, very important, because you need snow for this, Remember, snow, yellow, not good. But this is a good way of measuring how much you can actually piss at one time. What they would do was stand on top of these giant columns of snow and release their bladder and keep releasing their bladder. And whoever melted the snow quickest and peed for the longest, well, they would win the pissing contest. So they were all going about doing this, having a great time. And then one of them notices Dovregal. She isn't taking part. They won't stand for this. Like, every woman has to take part, and does she think she's better than them? Notions of her coming from foreign parts taking their men. So they get her and they drag her up to the tallest pile of snow, and they think, you know what, we'll just make a fool of her. So we will. And Dovregal, well, this is a bit odd, but okay. You know, when in Rome or when in Ulster, do as the Ulster women do. So she's standing on top of this big pile of snow and she releases. And it keeps going. And it keeps going. And the snow is melting and melting and melting. And the snow is melted, but she's still going. She's almost created a lake around her of her own urine. Until finally she has melted all of the snow in the local area. The women aren't too happy about this at all. Oh no, she's shown all of them up now. None of their husbands will want to ride them now that they've seen Dovregal. So what they do, this is not Irish women's greatest moment, I'll have to say. They claw at her face, pulling the skin from right where her hair meets her forehead. They pull it all the way off. They pull her hair out and they scratch her, flaying her alive with their fingers. And then they lock her in her own home. Meanwhile, Cuchulainn and Lude have been out, you know, ladding about, as lads do, doing lad things. Possibly not to each other, but you never know. Cuchulainn. So they get back anyway. And Lude's knocking on his door saying, Dovregal, let me in. It's time for me dinner. I'm really hungry. I've really worked up an appetite with Cuchulainn today. And there's no answer. So he bangs on the door again and says, let me in. Come on, it's freezing outside. She says, don't come in. Don't. And Cuchulainn, well, he hears this. So he bangs open the door. In he goes and they see Dovregal skinned alive and dying on the ground. Now what does Cuchulainn do now? Well, he goes into one of his terrible rages where his knees turn backwards, his eyes start popping out of his head. He turns every shade of yellow and green and purple there is, and he grows, well, into a sort of monster. He goes on a rampage all around and he knocks down every house in the town right on top of the women that killed Dovregal. But eventually he calms down enough to comfort his friend. But all of the women, including Dovregal, are now dead. And there was never a pissing contest again in that area.
An ancient tradition lost forever.
I know, terrible.
Oh, because we can't get along with the Scandinavians.
At least we can't blame this one on the Brits.
Yeah.
Ah, no. That sounds like a challenge.
What are you, a West Brit? Are you?
All right, before this gets out of hand, I think we should call the evening to an end. So
all right.
If people want to find more stories, we upload stories and essays about stories onto this channel, but we each have our own individual projects. So Stephen, where can people find more of you?
Google Hog and Dice. Everything that shows up is me. I am on most platforms.
And there should be a link down below.
Yeah, there'll be a link. My link tree will be below. that has all of my links, because that's what it's for.
Nisha, people want to find more of you. Where will they find you?
At the moment, I am mostly on this channel, but I have recently, as in yesterday, started a blog called The Filth Florist, because I stole the name from a comment on Stephen's tweet, because it was excellent. There you're going to find, basically, I'm going to do some written versions of the stories I tell, a couple of ranty, rambly pieces, probably even less focused than my videos, and occasionally reviews of books, which I'm hoping might actually be useful, because that's one of the few skills I am confident as a storyteller, is I'm good at discerning decent books to get new stories. And that is at the Filth Florist at WordPress. Basically, I think I'm the only result that comes up for the Filth Florist at the moment, and there will be a linky thing.
Sinead?
And Emily, where can we find you?
Yeah, Emily.
Well, you can find me at either Tales from the Shadows or Sounds from the Shadows, because there's reasons there's two different names. There's a link in below. I do the Sounds from the Shadows podcast, and I'm currently doing 12 Stories of Christmas, where I am telling a story each day. Today has been day 5, loosely linked to the Carol. And when I say loosely, I mean really, really, really loosely. Like super loosely. Like day 1, a pear tree shows up and that's about it. There's more to the story, but that's a connection to the Carol. Yeah, so you can find me at Tales from the Shadows, and the link is in the thingamablob. And Sinead?
Oh, right. Okay. So I'm mostly on this channel. I also do stuff with Emily with Tales from the Shadows. I'm also a playwright, which I am currently kind of working on in the background of everything else. And I make face masks and other crafty things with Deirdre at Aunt Hilda's Apprentice Etsy. So yeah, many things like that. I kind of spread myself a little bit over, like I don't put all my eggs in one basket. In fact, I'm not even an egg, and there are no baskets. I'm a baby chicken hopping from one lily pad to another.
Right. And
I'm
now,
also
Sounds like you're
and now, as ever in the live stream, I try to work out how to stop it.
Well, every time I do one as well, I'm going to be honest.
it's
They
tradition at this stage.
Don't make it simple. Why do they?
You know,
why
I'm
can't-
going to worry if we ever actually start the live stream, instantly realize that we are live and are professional all the way through, because it won't be us.
Yeah.
That will be the
Every
day
live
that the
stream
body
I've ever
snatchers
seen
arrive.
starts awkwardly.
Hey, we should
that like
enter the
Flo?
world as.
Okay. I think I found the right
Have
button.
we found it?
And I found the no go away thingamajigs. I found the button saying no. I
Oh.
I had the button saying end stream, and now it's gone away. I don't want to edit. I want to end. No, stop. I'm so close. I can see it. No, this is not suitable for children. Right, I found the button. I
No.
found the button. Yes, end immediately.